Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled The Junior 737 Copilot, that's me, who almost got a senior VP fired, and the awkward dinner. Well, I was very new at the airlines. I had been hired about 8 years earlier, although I spent 4.5 years of that on furlough. But I was a 737 co-pilot, first officer. Didn't really know much about the company, much about airline flying or anything like that. But because I had been in flight test at Boeing and I had a flight test background from the Air Force, I was asked by the Airline Pilots Association to be on this committee dealing with the 737-300. We were bringing the 737-300 online, and it was going to be flown with our basic 737-200 model. So they asked me to analyze if that was a good idea. So I came up with a 2-page letter, and I wrote a number of reasons why it could be a problem. And this type of letter that you typically call a smoking gun letter, because I pointed out a few things in there that could come back to haunt somebody who neglected to be concerned with them. Well, okay. My 2-page letter ended up with the company splitting the fleet. Instead of flying the two airplanes as one fleet, we had a 737-200 fleet and a 737-300 fleet. And of course, that cost the company a fair amount of money. Well, there was another consideration too that I found out about. So years later, I'm at an industry conference, aerospace industry type of conference, not quite this big of a conference, but there's a lot of people there. And by this time, I'm chairman of the ALPA National New Aircraft Evaluation and Certification Committee, and I'd flown a lot of the aircraft on test flights, and I've been to Airbus a lot and flown a lot of their aircraft. And I meet a gentleman there. We start talking, and he tells me that he used to work for United. I go, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, he used to be head of 737 maintenance, a vice president of maintenance out there, and was head of the 737 operation. And he left United and went on over, and he was working at Airbus. And he says, "Hey, I'll tell you what, let's go out to dinner. I'll buy." So, okay, sounds like a good deal to me. Airline pilots always take a free meal. So we get a nice restaurant, and we go out to eat. We sat down, we're having a nice meal, and we're just kind of chit-chatting, and he says, yeah, I was VP of 737 maintenance out there, and I was out there at the time we were bringing the 737-300 on. And I said, oh, that's interesting, because I wrote a paper at the time, early in my ALPA career and United career, that ended up in them splitting the fleet. And he looks at me for a second, and he goes, you're the guy. And I go, yeah, that almost got me fired, he said. And I go, what? He says, yeah, I told the company that the pilots would fly both aircraft as one fleet. And when it came down that was not going to happen, I almost got fired. And I go, oh, sorry about that. Well, let me tell you a little tale about, why this happened and why the fleet was split. I know you Southwest guys are going, what a bunch of, wussies. You can't fly different airplanes like that. But anyway, there's a couple of considerations that caused us a little heartburn. Okay, this is the 737-200, the very basic 737. There was a 100 model that was even kind of shorter. They later made the 500 model, which was like the 100 model, only shortened with the fancier avionics. This is the 300 model that we got, the CFM56 engines, and the main thing it had was a flight management system display, and we actually made quite an upgrade to that, and I'm going to talk about that in another presentation, because that's rather significant, what we accomplished there. But here's the basic 737-200 cockpit. I mean, it's basic there. There's no flight management system. You see down there by the throttles, there's no little pads to punch a bunch of numbers in and stuff like that. Now here's the 737-300 cockpit, and you notice it's got those little FMCs down there, flight management computers that power the flight management system. And you basically program your flight. If you're not familiar with that, you program your whole route in there. Where when you're on the 200, you use basically the paper charts. So this is the little guy here, the little panel. You sit there and you punch in. Now, there was a little issue with this. The way they originally started operating the fleet together. And there was a little issue with the way they would do schedules. The 200 model was used mostly on short routes, and the 300 model was used longer routes. Like you'd go Chicago-Peoria on the 200, and you'd go Chicago to Los Angeles on the 300. Well, the way they built the schedules, you could be flying the 200 for a couple of months before you saw a 300 again. So you were not programming any flight management system. You were operating off of paper charts. There were cases where guys would get back in this airplane after having been off it for months, and they had to get the manuals out to figure out how to program the darn thing. And that was causing a lot of consternation among the pilots. But now there's another issue that's especially problematic. This is the hydraulic system on the Dash 300 and the Dash 200. On the top is the Dash 300, on the bottom is the Dash 200. Now they kind of switched around the electric and the engine-driven pumps here on this when they came up with the 300. Now, typically when you get ready to push back, it's A's off and B's on. Okay, on the bottom depiction there, the A pumps are on and the B pumps are off. Well, you're getting ready to push, it's the opposite. Those two switches are off and the electrics are on. So when you push back and you start the engines, you don't pressurize the A system, because the A system operates the nose wheel steering. And you're pushing back, the nose wheel is turned. If you get A system pressure and it comes up immediately, and the copilot's supposed to call if he sees it. Well, by the time he calls it, it's too late, because the tow bar, you call it breaking the tow bar, but actually there's a little cylinder that's attached to the nose gear with a link that breaks. It's fairly easy to replace, but it's a big deal with the company if you do it. Trip's canceled, you're pulled off, and it's a disciplinary action. It's a very bad thing. Not something you want. Trips delayed, stuff like that. So on the bottom slide, those two pumps are off and the two right ones are on when you're ready to push back and start engines. Now on the upper side, what you do is you have number 1 switch is off, the 2 and the 3 are on, and number 4 is off. Well, if you have the same switch position on the top that you have on the Dash 200, so the switch position on the 300, well, that's fine. Engine number 1 provides no hydraulic pumps at all for either system, A or B. But on engine number 2, you've got that engine pump turned on. So when you start number 2 engine on pushback, you get A system hydraulics. It's going to center the nose wheel steering, and you're going to break the tow bar. And that's kind of a gotcha. And I said, we've got pilots who have been on this aircraft for a decade or more, and they're used to looking up there, and they're going to see what looks right in their mind, and it's going to be wrong, and it's going to cause a very nasty meeting with flight management. And it's a human factors deal. And I just wrote that up on the 2-page thing. And yeah, that probably got more attention than anything, because I talked about various performance issues and things like that. But this has got the attention of the company. And of course, the other point was that pilots could go for months without seeing the flight management system, and they just would not be familiar with it. We said, hey, if you can make sure they fly it very often, then probably it won't be bad. But that's not the way it was working, and that's basically not the way it was going to work. So I just put that together. Those were my thoughts. Those are my comments. Here I am. I'm barely an airline pilot, even knowing much about operations and stuff like that. I put that together, and it kind of went up the chain, and the company decided they had to split the fleets. Anyway, had the nice meal. Got done, and actually I don't think I ever saw this individual again, and he was probably just as happy about that as I may have been. Anyway, thanks for watching.